Now, let's go back to where we were, and which is the structure of the argument, the Grand Inquisitor argument, which I said last time, and which I say on the handout, is an antinomy. And an antinomy has a thesis. Up a little bit, yeah. Okay. It's funny, because last time it was less up, and it seemed okay, but now, how is it? Can you hear me? Okay. So, we got this antinomy, and we talked about the fact that there's always a thesis, an antithesis, and it looks like they are the, maybe that's just my jacket. Let's see. And it looks like they're the only alternatives, and each one seems so absolutely unacceptable and unintelligible or outrageous in whatever way, and it looks like the only alternative is to take the other one. And the only way out of an antinomy is that there must be a third one, because obviously if both of these options are unacceptable and you've got to do something, let's hope there's something else, the other way of looking at what you should do. Well, I'm just going to review, because I didn't have the page handy, the way the, it's funny, we got a big echo over there. Let's try. Isn't that too loud? Or only when I look down? You never. Okay. If it's all right with you, it's all right with me. On 239, I'm just setting up the alternatives. The alternatives are the Grand Inquisitor, who is clearly a kind of a caricature of the Roman Catholic Church, but not just any old caricature, but a kind of extrapolation of the worst features that you could imagine as the sort of what the church is tending toward, Dostoevsky thinks, since he doesn't like the Catholic Church. And the other one is, and that's what you have to figure out between the lines practically, is the Protestant form of Christianity. But he puts it in right at the beginning on 239 at the bottom, because he places this in the 16th century. And the 16th century is the time of the Protestant revolt. And then on 241, he comes back to it, just in case you didn't notice. I mean, because a lot of things happened in that century. But here's what he's interested in, about 10 lines down. And just then there appeared in the north of Germany a terrible new heresy. Okay, that's Luther, the terrible new heresy. And that's the other column in the chart. So and one more thing, all of this is obvious, but it just to put us back in the right frame of mind. The Grand Inquisitor does a lot of talking. In fact, he does all the talking. Jesus doesn't say anything. But that's not at all important for what we're interested in, because we're interested in these two positions. And so I'm just going to say Jesus says this, and the Grand Inquisitor says that. If I were being accurate, I would have to say, Ivan says that the Grand Inquisitor says that Jesus says such and such, because it's being written by Ivan. But I can't go through that every time. It will never get done. So, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether Jesus ever said it. It doesn't even matter whether the Protestants really believe it. It's an extrapolation of an extreme form of the Protestant position practically to absurdity and off the chart. And yet, and this is what's most amazing, I will quote you quotes from Kierkegaard that are just like this. So Dostoevsky hasn't really gone off the rails. He's imagined a certain extreme form of Protestantism as the other alternative in this debate. So where are we? Well, we're ready for the third alternative. So, and I think somebody said already at the end, right, at the end last time what it was, but I'm not sure. Did we get to that? Or are we now at we didn't. Okay, good. Then we're at the question, what's the third alternative? I think I wrote it here, so it's not going to be a big secret. I wish I could write on the board. I wouldn't hand out this chart until I had written it on little by little. But anyway, the third alternative is the Russian Orthodox Church, a third interpretation of Christianity, which Dostoevsky thinks is largely right, though he's ready to rewrite it when it doesn't fit his existentialized understanding of what the basic Christian experiences are. But basically, sort of cleaned up a bit, he's all for the Russian Orthodox Church. In fact, he thinks that it will save the world, because it's the only branch of Christianity that is, I think he thinks, though I don't know where he says it anywhere, sort of true to the original inspiration of Christianity, unmessed up by philosophy and Platonism in any way, and uncommitted to any supreme being, and committed to understanding a certain way of life that Jesus exemplified. And because the Russian Orthodox Church has somehow been far enough out of touch to not be Platonized, it's got a better chance of getting Christianity right. That's what, and getting it right isn't the game. I mean, whereas the question is, does Christianity have a deep understanding of what human beings need, like, and then you can see all this list of things they need: bread, community, and under morality, confessions, and miracles. That all of that is something, once it's existentialized, that you will see that human beings need all that, and that the Russian Orthodox Church, sort of exemplified in Father Zosima, has understanding of all that. And all it needs besides Zosima is somebody like Alyosha to take it out into the world and actually live it, and this will transform the world. How that could be possible, how somebody sensible like Dostoevsky could have such a view, takes a long time to work out. But he does, and he brilliantly makes it seem almost plausible. So there we are, ready to start. Anybody want to say anything about the overall picture before we plunge into details? Because the project for today is to go through the Grand Inquisitor story and set up these antinomies so that in the next lecture we can talk about how the Russian Orthodox Church solves these antinomies, which will take several lectures because it's all spread all over the book. Anything about that? Okay, then let's go on. Now, I mentioned last time how most readers get it wrong, particularly if you read the Grand Inquisitor story out of context. It certainly looks like it's supposed to be some kind of extreme existentialist, sort of Sartrean praise of Jesus as the person who understood the necessity of and the burden of total freedom. But even in context, people like Berdayev get it wrong. And what's interesting to me is that it's no surprise they get it wrong. It's presented in such a way that it looks like, well, I don't know what it looks like. Some people think it looks like the Grand Inquisitor is right. Some people think it looks like Jesus is right. Nobody that I've read, seems to think that maybe there's a third alternative and that neither of them are right, that people get trapped into the antinomy. By the way, whenever I say I haven't read that much of secondary stuff about Dostoevsky, and I don't recommend at all that you go out and read any of it. The chances of it getting anything right are not too high. But in case you do read something, and it does say the kind of thing I've been saying, please tell me about it, because I'm ready to give credit to whoever's got this and learn from anybody who's got a deeper grasp of it than I have. I just haven't found them yet. And they're probably out there somewhere in some language. So if you find anybody, let me know. Meanwhile, Dostoevsky understood that people weren't going to understand what was going on in the Grand Inquisitor story. To my amazement, I found a letter quoted by him, quoted in a book by a guy named Belknap, whom I don't know who that is, and it's a letter. You have to know that this book came out in installments, and you had to sort of subscribe to it. And that's how Dostoevsky wrote his books, and that's, I guess, how lots of people wrote their books in those days. And so there are these cliffhanging breaks. So after the Grand Inquisitor story, and long before you hear about the views of Zosima, Dostoevsky is beginning to try to tell you the third alternative. But he knows that after the Grand Inquisitor story, people are going to not understand yet that there's a third alternative. And he says in his letter, as my answer to all this negative side, I've planned this sixth book, A Russian Monk, and I'm trembling for it in this way. Will it be an adequate answer, especially since it's not a direct answer to the stand expressed in the Grand Inquisitor? Because it's not a direct answer to the stand expressed in the Grand Inquisitor point by point, but only obliquely. You'll see how wonderfully oblique it is as we go through. I'll show you, and you'll see once you start playing this game, where he's hidden the answer, sort of like Easter eggs all around the book. And as usual, he will sort of hit you over the head with it if you're watching for the clue and say, here, you see, I've done it now, we got this one. The best one, I'm saving, I forget whether I'm saving it till last or not, I imagine I am, we'll see. Is, I said this once before, how in the world is he going to deal with miracles and show you a miracle which is somehow doesn't break the laws of physics and chemistry, which is what you would think miracles normally do. But that's jumping way ahead of the story. So let me go back to where we are. Now, he puts it in this biblical context. That's the next thing, which is just sort of makes it a little more hard to follow, but it's a kind of nice literary move. He wants to map it onto the three offers of Satan, the three temptations of Jesus. That's how he's going to divide up his antinomies. I mean, there's going to be a different standoff, a different antinomy for each of the three temptations. And the first temptation is that Jesus should turn stones to bread and thereby become a world leader by founding a kind of state church. And no, that's the second one, sorry. The first one is he will turn stones to bread, and that will solve the world hunger problem. Second, he's tempted. That's the first temptation. The second temptation is that he could become a world leader and found a universal church. And the third one is he will get people to believe in him by performing miracles. I've changed the order. The way Dostoevsky takes it up, he does bread, miracles, and then church. But I forget why. I decided I wanted to do it this way. The Grand Inquisitor, now, and here's the overall antinomy that is behind all the particular ones. The Grand Inquisitor claims that human beings are weak, worthless, rebellious. They're like the lackey, insect, base side of the self. That's their real nature. You hear that every once in a while, but just to take one of the places where he says it, on 246, in the end of that top paragraph, men are, or just they are, weak, vicious, worthless, and rebellious. A little further, thou didst promise them the bread of heaven, but I repeat, can it be compared with earthly bread in the eyes of the weak, ever sinful, and ignoble race of men? So the Grand Inquisitor has a very dim idea of human beings and what you can expect of them, whereas Jesus has a very high idea, like what I said about the idiot. Remember, Ivan is telling us a story in which he's supposed to be showing the totally wrong-headed idea of a completely pure Jesus who is totally innocent and is no way tied up with original sin or the evil in the world. And Dostoevsky thinks that's impossible. If Jesus is a man, then he must be tied up with the evil in the world. And only if he had experienced the evil in the world could he help the other people who were evil to get out of their evilness. But the Jesus that Ivan is portraying, and who's causing a lot of trouble, that's the Grand Inquisitor's job to fix, that Jesus is making this totally impossible demand on people. He wants them to be noble, pure, and totally free. On 249 at the bottom. And the Grand Inquisitor admits that there are some people who are strong enough to be free of all, to live on practically no food, to freely direct their lives without any dependence on miracle or on the church, to be able to live in total isolation and in total freedom. There are such people, but they're very few, and it doesn't do any good if for all the millions of other people that there are these few, because Jesus is expecting everybody to behave like that. And the Grand Inquisitor says, well, he behaved like that, but then the few other people, but that's not going to do people any good to ask them all to be self-sufficient, able to live alone, on roots and berries, and without miracles, and without a church, and so forth. He's saying this at the bottom of 249. They, that's the people like him, had borne thy cross. They had endured scores of years in the barren, hungry wilderness, living upon locusts and roots. And thou mayest indeed point with pride at those children of freedom, of free love, of free and splendid sacrifice for thy name. But remember, there were only thousands, and what of the rest? So his claim is that Jesus is asking of everybody to do what only a very few rare, super ascetic people can do. And remember, Ivan in the background is making it look as if Jesus, as he describes him in his story, is so perfect that he has no sympathy for the weak, worthless, rebellious human beings. And so the Grand Inquisitor understands his job is to help humanity out. He's going to change Jesus' Christianity into a Christianity that every normal human being can live in happily and get a lot out of life. And that's the job of the Roman Catholic Church, to correct the big deal mistake that Jesus made because he was so pure, not understanding what you have to do for human beings and what you can expect from human beings. This is all, he says it on 244. Where? Oh, I'm not looking at 244. As the middle of 244. For 15 centuries, we've been wrestling with thy freedom, and now it's ended and over for good. And then skipping down to the paragraph, the next big paragraph. No, not at all. He claims it is a merit for himself. This is Ivan explaining. And his church, that at last they vanquish freedom and have done so to make men happy. And that tells you sort of the general position of the Grand Inquisitor on the one hand and the general position of Jesus on the other. And they're dealing with, and another way to put it, and it's sort of interesting, you see Ivan in a way is the natural one to be writing it. They're dealing with the two sides of the self. They've each got only one half of the factors. The Grand Inquisitor thinks that everybody is insect and Sodom and I forget, lackey and base and bad, and Jesus thinks that everybody is free and lofty and good and like the Madonna, like an angel, and so forth. And you can't get the two, you can't have both. And that produces this antinomy, because each time you try to sort of run the whole world on one side or the other, you run up against the fact that, well, there is the other side of this, and these two sides are contradictory, but they're both right. Human beings are angels and insects. They go in for Sodom and the Madonna. They are lofty and lackey, and so forth. And Dostoevsky understands that, of course, this conflict. He calls it a conflict or a contradiction in the middle of page 245, where he says, for in those three questions, those are, what three questions? I don't know. Let's see. those are the three temptations: to turn the stones to bread, to set up an earthly kingdom, and to perform miracles to make people believe in him. From those three questions, the whole subsequent history of mankind is, as it were, brought together into one whole and foretold. In them are united all the unsolved historical contradictions of human nature. You can see why, the way I read it, I zap onto that sentence as the sort of evidence that Dostoevsky has the Kierkegaard-Pascal view of the self. But there's things in that sentence that require me to talk about it a while. It dawned on me only little by little how peculiar what he's saying there is. He says that the historical contradictions of human nature. You realize if you listen to that carefully, that's a contradiction. I mean, because if it's the contradictions of human nature, it shouldn't be historical. It should have been there in the ancient Egyptians and in the Bali and in Japan and here. If that's the way human nature is, so it is. But if it's historical, then it doesn't seem that it's human nature. It seems like it's human culture that produces this, the way it seems that Jesus, or Kierkegaard thinks that the Jesus coming along and being the God-man sort of produces human beings who have two factors that are equally essential, which the Greeks didn't have. Well, I don't know whether this is Dostoevsky's making a mistake or whether he's saying something extremely deep. I suspect he doesn't know what he's saying. But since he's usually he's on to something very deep. And it's something Pascalian. Remember I said one of the existentialist features of Pascal's thinking is that he says custom is our nature, meaning that human nature is a function of the particular culture that you grow up in. The human beings, remember I said that about Buddhists. For all I know, Buddhists are different, have a different nature than we do, and they're not in despair when they try to get rid of the temporal and the finite. So in any case, I think Dostoevsky knows that the kind of contradiction that he's setting up here between the lofty and the wacky, and between the earthy and the heavenly, where they're both essential and you can't get rid of either, is something that's caused in the history of our culture, and it's produced a certain human nature, which now we are, and we have to deal with it. And the Grand Inquisitor and Jesus are sort of fighting over how to deal with it, because it's a contradiction. We're back to that again. There's another interesting part of that sentence which I just read. He says, in them, in this contradiction, or in them what? In the three questions, I brought together the subsequent history of mankind and the unsolved historical contradictions of human nature. Let's look at the unsolved historical contradictions. That's interesting. The other translations say the insoluble. I don't have my Russian person. I believe the last time I asked a Russian person, they said it was the insoluble contradiction. I hope that's, well, I don't care which it is, but it makes a big difference who's saying it. If it's Dostoevsky saying it, he better be saying the unsolved contradiction, because he thinks that if everything goes well, thanks to the Russian church, they will be solved, because everybody will come to live by the third possibility that Christianity has, but nobody's managed to work it out and live it yet. So they are historical. They started at a certain point, these contradictions, with Jesus presumably, and they'll end at the point where Russia saves the world. And I think that's what Dostoevsky thinks. They're the unsolved historical contradictions. Now, who could be saying that they're unsolvable if it reads the other way? I'm prepared. Whatever anybody tells me, I'm perfectly happy with the translation. I want to know which. Why would it be okay if it said the unsolvable contradiction? That wouldn't fit Dostoevsky's story very well. That would leave there, you wouldn't have this Christian comedy, this optimism that if you go through enough suffering and anguish, everything is going to work out. Who wrote this story of the Grand Inquisitor? Who am I really quoting when I say the unsolved historical contradiction? Exactly. Who said this? Oh, good. Oh, yeah. Okay. For Ivan, it would be right to say unsolvable, of course, because poor Ivan can't get the contradiction together in him. He's trying to throw out half. So he's not going to think that if you just become a good Russian Orthodox Christian, this is all going to work out all right. He doesn't think it's a good idea to be a Christian at all. And it's certainly not going to work out all right for Ivan. I keep hinting that very bad things are going to happen by him and to him in the course of the book. Okay. So now, having gone through all that in one sentence, which seems to me pretty important, let me skim up to where I am. Okay, yeah, I'm ready now to go back and start talking about the specific antinomies. Why did it go boom, boom? I don't know. Okay, so on 249, no, that's all right. That's just there are the good people, and on 248, there are the bad people, or the bad view of people, the unruly race of men. I don't think I read the middle of 248, did I? Thou didst proudly and well like a god. That's what the Grand Inquisitor says to Jesus. That the weak, unruly race of men, are they gods, and so forth. We're back to the antinomies. And now we want to talk about people should be, and then you get one list, and that's godlike. Do I have this over here? Yeah, under the thesis. What Jesus' Protestant thesis is, people should be godlike, and they should be completely free. Let's call that the lofty side. And then there's the anti-Jesus view of the Roman Catholic Church, which people are and can't help but be and will always be weak and slavish. Having put that, you can say that the antinomy then is, all is still, without going into these specific details, is total freedom. That's the Protestant side. And that is total freedom, total individuality, total independence. That's what Jesus demands. And the other side is slavery, dependence on authority, but happiness. That's what the Grand Inquisitor promises. And if you look at them, you see that they're an antinomy. I mean, the idea of total autonomy, total individuality, total independence, total freedom, that's asking too much of any of them. And on the other hand, if the only alternative, and so we better find something else. If the alternative seems to be, well, you've got to have a kind of an authority, a kind of state church, which organizes everything and takes away everybody's freedom from them. And that seems impossible. So you bounce back and forth. One, the total autonomy freedom story makes you believe you need a dependence on an authority story, and this total slavish dependence on an authority story makes you think, well, that's not what human beings are. They've got a certain amount of freedom, and you bounce back and forth. And now the point is to do it with the specific issues, which is what I want to talk about the rest of the time. But now maybe somebody has something to say. I mean, I've been throwing a lot of stuff at you, or questions, or confusions, or anything. I can't believe that people are just, everything is perfectly clear, and you agree with my reading of the book, and you agree with Dostoevsky, and you agree with Ivan, you're in good shape. Okay.
It seems like Luther likes to be really go into the history of the Roman Catholic Church, like the fact that he started with
He doesn't have to, because he sets it in the 15th century, and that's when they're very afraid of the Lutherans, and the Grand Inquisitors are out threatening Galileo with torture if he doesn't take back he puts it at the moment when the sort of freedom that Luther represents, and the Luther's kind of claim that everybody's a pope, and you don't need the Catholic Church, was up against the Catholic Church, which was doing all it could to stamp out these bad guys. And it comes back once more in the book, just in passing. We'll see it today, when it turns out the Lutherans are even prowling around in Russia trying to convert people. That's a funny idea, but it must have been true. I guess, or at least Ivan puts it in. But anyway, you don't need to know the history. I don't know myself when the Grand Inquisitor really existed and what he really thought or anything like that, because it's supposed to be just two kinds. Remember, don't lose track of the point. Two extreme kinds of Christianity, each of which do justice only half of the self, are confronting each other and proposing two alternatives, which are always equally impossible to accept, and each one seems to say we have to accept the other. That's the level at which to understand it. Yeah.
Ivan is aware of the incredible similarities between the Grand Inquisitor and himself and Jesus and all the other stuff. Do you think he's doing that on purpose?
I don't think he thinks of the similarity to Jesus and Alyosha, but I think that you're onto something very interesting when you ask, isn't Ivan, like the Grand Inquisitor, one of the people who is able to be free on his own, not in the church, not needing miracles, and so forth? And the hint that Ivan does know that is how the story ends. Do you remember what happens after they have this, either that the Grand Inquisitor has this debate with Jesus? Okay, so we'll start with the first one. See, I think it's very puzzling. Why does Jesus kiss the Grand Inquisitor? I mean, the Grand Inquisitor has spent all this time trying to undo Jesus' whole work and has gotten rid of the freedom and so forth. Well, it looks like because Ivan identifies with the Grand Inquisitor and thinks of himself and the Grand Inquisitor as what do I think? Wait a minute. Just a second. That what I'm saying makes no sense, but I'm trying to understand why I'm saying it. So Ivan, see, when Ivan has Jesus kiss the Grand Inquisitor, I think Ivan is saying that there's something admirable about the Grand Inquisitor. And Jesus recognizes that. And that is that the Grand Inquisitor does all that he does for lofty motives. And that he's ready to try to help everybody at a sort of very abstract level. And Ivan thinks of himself as having lofty motives and sort of being against children suffering, though he doesn't go out and do anything about it, but he's sensitive to it and he sympathizes with going, consciously at least, fixing it. Anyway, so I think you're absolutely on the right track. I think Ivan thinks of himself as, in some ways, enough like the Grand Inquisitor, that the Grand Inquisitor, that he has Jesus recognize that the Grand Inquisitor is on to something honorable. Why? Because now, okay, and now Ivan, Alyosha is like Jesus, I think, but yeah, I guess you want to say something about this? Because I don't know what to say. He's asking hard questions. Go ahead.
I think it's pretty almost like Jesus, not having a response to everything that the Grand Inquisitor said, but actually that his silence speaks more than his whole, lot of things that the Grand Inquisitor came up with. Kind of like, not the secret death, kind of like, wow, you talk so much about these people's dangerous and look at yourself.
The Grand Inquisitor is that's what's good about him, I take it. He really did sort of survive alone in the desert, he says, with freedom. And he has the strength not even to believe in God because he doesn't get coerced by miracles and so forth. Ivan likes that. And are we disagreeing? I don't know. And I think, I'm trying to say that I'm sort of agreeing with him that that we've got to make some sense of it. I'll tell you what, let's put it on hold, because you jumped into this interesting issue. Once we've discussed all the issues on both sides, let's ask ourselves again. I'm certainly open to what I have never been convinced of any interpretation of it. Let's ask ourselves again next time why, and you can think about it in the meantime, why does Ivan have Jesus kiss the Grand Inquisitor? And why does Alyosha kiss Ivan? And then we'll see. You want to say something about it? Yeah.
This problem is earlier in the book, you see that you list many of our Orthodox church for the father upon. But how does that work with the idea that the Orthodox church is isolated in these they hold the exact same figure freedom?
Yes, that's right. He says he could live on worms and mushrooms or something. Okay, Father Fairpont's a very important figure coming up in this discussion within the next 10 minutes. Just wait and see. But you have to bring him into the discussion because Dostoevsky didn't put him in there for nothing. In fact, there's everything in the book is there for some reason or other. Yeah.
You want to believe God? I mean, it's like reading that, like, you can go to God and just have a conversation with you.
Well, I see what you mean. Okay, let's think about that. Yes. That's right. I know that's very strange too. The book, the story, Ivan's story is framed in two very peculiar events that I don't claim to understand. One of them is that Jesus is performing a miracle at the very time that the Grand Inquisitor comes up to him and says, you don't perform miracles. You refuse to perform miracles. I don't know what to think about that. And the Grand Inquisitor knows that Jesus is the God-man. And yet, he obviously doesn't believe that Jesus has got the power to do these things. He's got the power to, take back what Jesus is doing. I guess if I had to make up something, I'd say the Grand Inquisitor knows that Jesus is a very important human being, like the Hebrews think, prophet, and the Muslims too. I mean, there's a very important guy, and he came and he brought a very important message, but it was a bad message, and the Grand Inquisitor is fixing it. How that relates to his miracle performing, I can't imagine. To put those, it's amazing how you guys jump to the hardest things. I think that's terrific. But we're going to come back to them, I promise, and think about that. If anybody can understand how the miracle in the beginning, it may just be a bump in Ivan's story. I mean, that's how I've always taken it. I can't fit it into his story. But if we could, that would be better. You going to say something? I saw you saw a hand up. Yeah. Yeah.
Ivan tells the story, and he tells it like it's like a story, and it sort of comes back to him. This story is not one to take advantage, and one of the antagonists people saying.
Why would you kiss him for that?
Well, Alyosha, it seems like Alyosha is telling that he's not just a story, and he's going to take a role and live one of the roles, even if it seems.
Well, maybe. Why don't you wait? I mean, it can't hurt. You want to say more? Because I don't know. I have no opinion yet. Go ahead.
Alyosha is going to be moved by the story and translate it into reality, and he understands.
I think that's right.
Right, and it's kind of like you're just playing a role. You can't imagine that Alyosha is really moved, and it's more than just a story.
Alyosha is really moved by the story. That's right. And Ivan is doing it as a kind of intellectual exercise. That's what you're saying too. And Alyosha is kissing him an appropriate response to Alyosha's being moved by the story, which Ivan is putting up as a kind of a put down of the Jesus that Alyosha believes in. I don't know. Wait and see. Wait and see. I mean, I wish I had a great answer that I'm just saying wait and see because I'm going to spring this on you later. I don't know. But we'll all try to figure it out later. But the further you've read and the more I've had a chance to lay out the Grand Inquisitor, the better chance we have of making sense of the two toughest things in it. You get the last word on this. Can you hear her?
Some books when you ever did it was like Granny did have this very cynical outlook on things. It's not clear, like, whether or not he believes in God or whether or not he loves his neighbor.
That's true. It's not clear. Let me repeat that. If the Grand Inquisitor loves humanity or God or so forth. Although, I mean, I must say, Ivan wants us to believe that. I mean, he wrote the story, and his Grand Inquisitor says he's doing it out of love of human beings. I think we're supposed to believe that. And I think we're supposed to believe in his lofty motives, because otherwise, why would Ivan want to write this story? He wants to show that Jesus is all wrong and driven the Roman Church into this because they're good guys. I mean, that's what Ivan wants to show. But on the other hand, I mean, I don't know what to say. Ivan is such a kind of player around with ideas. And you'll see he ties up all those monks into knots, which we have to talk about by this article he's written, if you've read far enough. It took me years to figure out about the church becoming the state and the state becoming the church. There's all a very deep, clever argument in there. And there's a very deep, clever argument in the Grand Inquisitor story. And what you're asking is sort of how seriously does Ivan take it? And we can't use as an argument that to prove anything about what Ivan thinks that Jesus comes up and kisses the Grand Inquisitor, because that's inside of Ivan's story. So is that part of this intellectual game, or is that some Ivan revealing how much he really identifies with the Grand Inquisitor and thinks that they're both sort of suffering because everybody else are such awful people and only they are pure, which is maybe what, I don't know. Stop. I'd rather talk about something I can help you with, and but I don't want to stop too. I'm ready to come back to it because I want you to help me with it. But right now, I can't do anything to make sense of what's going on, and everything everybody has said makes some sense, but none of it seems to me to make an answer which everybody will say, aha, yeah, of course, that's what it meant all along. And I bet there is such an answer lurking. But let's go do it one by one until we get back to the end, and then we'll ask about that. I won't bring up the miracle on the steps of the church, but if anybody has any ideas about it, late when we finish going through them all, and when we finish going through miracles, you bring it up, or come to my office and tell me about it. Okay, now, here we go. There's three kinds of issues. The economic issues, based on turning the stones into bread, and that has all to do with sort of material satisfaction, how you have to set up, organize the world so that people have enough to eat. And then there are the issues around the community and the church, and how much everybody has to share in one religion, one system of beliefs. And then there's this sort of grab bag, which I just called number 3 here on the chart, morality. It has 4 components: confessions, miracles, mystery, and authority. And I don't understand anything about mystery and authority. There's certainly a possible paper topic in there for anybody. Once you see how Dostoevsky finds the third way in all of the other antinomies, if anybody can find out what the antinomy is of authority and the antinomy is of mystery, and what Dostoevsky's third way is, I'd love to know. And I bet it's in here. But I won't do it because I don't know it. But I'll do all the others, and maybe that will give you a chance to figure out the missing ones. Or maybe they're just missing them. All these many times I've read it and taught it, I haven't found them yet. There's a possibility that he just didn't do it. Okay, let's go. The economic issue, that's, for better or for worse, that's the least interesting one. Don't get bored by this one and turn off, because the other two are so fascinating. And the other two tie in with important things we've been reading, like a lot of Kierkegaard. This is sort of Dostoevsky off on his own, worrying about and predicting, really, the Soviet Union, communism, which he saw was coming in Russia, and he was very worried. Because this is about how you have to organize society so that everybody has enough to eat. And the basic antinomy is that if you have a free enterprise, a free economy, then people won't have enough to eat. There'll be scarcity. And if you want an economy in which everybody has all their material needs met, you're going to have a completely state-controlled socialism. That's his antinomy. It's an interesting antinomy. His solution is interesting, but it's all nothing that he's particularly original or gripping about, I don't think. Let's just go over it. So the first issue, you can see at the bottom of 245, about 15 lines from the bottom. Or not even that, maybe 10. Turn these stones, that is, turn them into bread, and mankind will run after you like a flock of sheep, grateful and obedient, though forever trembling, yes, lest you withdraw the hand and deny them the bread. This is to say, if you're in charge of the material well-being, you can get people to do whatever you want. And the Jesus figure says he wants people to be moral and free and give up material comforts. He demands total asceticism of people. And back again, and just going around the dialectic or the antinomy, and the Grand Inquisitor says, yeah, but you can't expect people, normal people, to be ascetics and go out and live on roots and berries. If you want people to be moral, you have to feed people and give them the basis, give them a comfortable life, and then ask them to be moral. I was just remembering the Brecht, the Threepenny Opera. First comes eating, and then morality. Only erst comes die Fressen, nachher die Moral, and that, which is part of it, which is exactly the moral of that's what the Grand Inquisitor is saying. So look at this now on 246. The 5 lines down, feed men and then ask of them virtue. That's what the Grand Inquisitor says. But the Grand Inquisitor says you can't feed them and give them freedom, both. That's the end of that paragraph. That's the important part. No science will give them bread so long as they remain free. In the end, they will lay their freedom at our feet and say, make us your slaves, but feed us. That's what he thinks is going to happen when the communists take over in Russia. They will understand at last that freedom and bread enough for all are inconceivable together. And that's probably true. That is, it looks like, it isn't as if we can say, well, now we know that the socialists took away all the freedom, and in Russia, and they did provide everybody with material, minimum well-being, I take it. There weren't slums and people below the poverty line in the Soviet Union. There were just people afraid of the what do you call them? People who were running around making sure that they didn't criticize the state. The what? What are the names of the state police? I just can't think of it. Really? Anyway, they were afraid of whatever. They were afraid that if they said anything, they'd be sent off to Siberia, and they were. So on the one hand, it looks like you could take away everybody's freedom and make a police state and actually guarantee that there's nobody starving. And that's what the Grand Inquisitor proposes. And he says it's incompatible with a free state where everybody can live where they want and work at whatever job they want and go to school or not go to school if they're in college if they want. It's not possible in such an economy that everybody will just be materially well off. And that seems to be right too, roughly. We've got a free economy. Are there people in this very rich country below the poverty line? Yes, there are, lots of them, and some of them sleeping on the streets of Berkeley. And that's interesting, whether it's impossible to set up a state in which there is no slums and nobody. The Scandinavians, I guess, come as near as anybody to doing it. But Dostoevsky has a case that the Grand Inquisitor, Ivan, whoever, has a case that it really does seem to be a trade-off. You either need a total planned economy, to talk like the Soviets, in which case everybody will be fed, or you need a free enterprise system, in which case there'll be this at least huge difference between the rich and the poor, in which the poor sort of fall below the line and aren't sufficiently fed. That's the debate. So where are we? Well, look, did I read 246? I just did. So some people can practice asceticism, like the Grand Inquisitor, but the majority of people are too weak to do that. If everybody could live on roots and berries, then you could have a freedom for everybody, and nobody would be starving and below the poverty line, because everybody would be living as if they were barely had enough food. And but the majority of people are too weak to do that. Funny, my notes are not right. I'm too weak to do it. Just a second. I guess I'm looking for this. The middle, roughly, of 248. Thou didst proudly and well like God, but the weak, unruly race of men, are they gods? Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. It's all over the place, so I'm not going to worry to find it. What I want to find is something else. But look what I did find, which I forgot to read. Lost it again. I have to find something that's very important. I'm amazed that I forgot to read it. Look at this. Did I read this on 253? I don't think I did. This is the proof that the third thing is the Russian Orthodox Church, which is something you might well want me to give you. I mean, it's amazing. Let me just write it down on here. On 253, that's the third possibility. Okay. Just so you know, I didn't make it up. I showed you the Luther part. The Grand Inquisitor part is obvious. Now look on 253, the beginning of that last big paragraph. Never mind the first sentence, but then Alyosha says, and who will believe you about freedom? Is that the way to understand it? That's not the idea of it in the Orthodox Church. That's Rome. So now it turns out the Grand Inquisitor is Rome, of course. And Alyosha is saying, yeah, but you're giving this a story which isn't the Protestant story or the Grand Inquisitor story. You are. You're giving those other views, but you're not giving the Russian Orthodox view. At least I tell you, Dostoevsky always leaves one hint, and that's the one. I don't know how I didn't read it. But now let's go back. Where are we? I'm trying to lay out this antinomy about the people who are too weak to live on nothing. So here's the bottom of 249. I may have read it already, but I'll read it again. The people who bore thy cross endured for years in the barren, hungry wilderness, living on locusts and roots. Thou mayest indeed point with pride at those children of freedom, of free love, free and splendid sacrifice for thy name. But remember, there are only 1,000, and what of the rest? Yeah, I read it, but that's the important thing. You can't build a world around the ascetics in order to combine freedom and food. Most people aren't capable of being ascetics. The interesting test would be, and we'll come back to that, bear that in mind, whether Zosima and Alyosha are ascetics and sort of live on the minimal amount of food to live on. We'll see about that. But in the meantime, let's keep our eye on this. The majority are too weak. So the Grand Inquisitor's argument is that if everyone lived on roots and mushrooms, there would be enough food to go around. But in a world in which weak and self-indulgent people eat all they can, there's going to be scarcity. And you won't be able to feed all the people unless you have this organized, completely state-controlled economy. No science will give them bread as long as they're free. I read that, didn't I? If I didn't, I will, on 246. I did read it. Okay, so we've got that. And the church will take away their food and give it back to them, in effect, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. It will be. That's what Marx said. It will be state socialism. On 251, at the bottom of the last paragraph, whole paragraph. Receiving bread from us, they will see clearly that we take the bread made by their hands from them to give it to them. Presumably from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. But you can't let that just happen. You've got to plan your whole economy if you're going to do that. And then you have to make people take the jobs that are needed to be taken, and you have to test people and make them take the jobs that their aptitude fits, and send them to the part of the country where whatever needs to be produced, and that takes away their freedom. So, okay, now, interestingly enough, I think that I'm going to do this in a different way than I planned. I think we should answer each of these one at a time instead of answering them all at the end. So I'm going to jump to the third. You want to know right away, if you're following this, what's the answer to the bread question. Okay, I'm going to jump to the answer to the bread question. Do people need material satisfaction in order to be moral? That's one of the questions left over. How much material satisfaction do they need? On one side of the antinomy is the extreme ascetic view attributed to Jesus. You don't need any food to be moral. And is there anyone in the book who is a holy ascetic like Jesus demands? Now, who is the one who brought this up? You. Yes, there is a holy ascetic, just exactly the course of just exactly the kind of person that the Grand Inquisitor says Jesus says is what everybody should be. And who is that? Well, he already told us. Father Ferapont. Now, Father Ferapont is an interesting character. He lives on the border of the monastery. He's an enemy of Zosima, and he is a prideful guy who is an extreme ascetic and does live just the way the Grand Inquisitor lived once in the forest on mushrooms and berries. On 168, we hear about him. So he says on 168, about 3/4 of the line down, yes, I can give up their bread, not needing it at all, go into the forest and live there on mushrooms and berries. But they can't give up their bread here. They are in bondage to the devil. Nowadays, the unclean deny that there's need for such fasting. Haughty and unclean is their judgment. And what about Father Ferapont? Does he illustrate that? He illustrates that people can do this, live in this way. We just see that, and I think, okay, yeah, but what about him? Is he somebody we're supposed to admire? Is he a model like Zosima? No, he's completely crazy. He's a prideful, spiteful, jealous, and that's bad enough. But I mean, besides that, he's totally insane. On 168 at the bottom, he's telling us that he saw a devil sitting on a man's chest, and then he tells us on 169, I can see right through them. When I was coming out from the superiors, I saw one, that's a devil, hiding from me behind the door. He was a big one, 1.5 yards or more high, with a thick, long gray tail, and the tip of his tail was in the crack of the door, and I was quick and slammed the door, pinching his tail in it. He squealed and began to struggle, and I made the sign of the cross over him 3 times, and he died on the spot like a crushed spider. He must have rotted there in the corner. He must be stinking. But they don't see it. They don't smell. And that is the other monks. They don't see these devils all over the place. Well, are we supposed to think that he's a good guy and he sees the devils all over the place and the other ones are all just too self-indulgent and eat too much food and miss them? No, we're supposed to think this is the kind of ascetic that we don't need, and that this is not the way, this is not the way to be a good, moral, joyful, loving person. There's nothing good and loving about Father Ferapont. He's just bad. So it looks like the whole asceticism proposal isn't good. That's half the story. Now the other half is there any evidence in the book that people need more than the minimal amount of food? more even than bread, let alone more than worms and berries and mushrooms. Yes, there is evidence like that. Nice, fun evidence, which I will get to right now. So first there's the story, there is that Zosima is worried about the priests who need food in order to fight off the Lutherans. Unfortunately, I do believe I didn't mark it. I doubt if anybody can just turn to it. That would be too much. Or maybe I can. I don't even think I can do that. But let me try. It's in the Russian monk, starting on 173. Somewhere he tells us about what happens to... here they are. On 282 it is. I have to write it down. Okay, look at this now. Here we are in the middle of page 282. Two interesting things. I mean, you get to see the Lutherans again prowling around, and you get to see that the priests can't do good if they don't have enough to eat. Friends and teachers, I've heard more than once, and of late one may hear it more often, that the priests, and above all the village priests, are complaining that their miserable income and their miserable income and humiliating lot. They plainly state, even in print and so forth, that if Lutherans and heretics come and lead the flock astray, they let them, because they have so little to live on. May the Lord increase that sustenance that is so precious to them, for their complaint is just. But of a truth I say, if anyone is to blame in the matter, half the fault is ours. Well, that's typical of Zosima, always blaming himself. But the important thing I want to get out of this is, it's clear that Zosima, whom you can always trust, remember I read you the letter early on in this lecture, that Dostoevsky says in the Confessions of Zosima, he's answering the Grand Inquisitor story, but indirectly. Well, here's one answer. Zosima is saying, you've got to be feeding people. You can't expect them to live on minimal stuff and go out and do good deeds and fight off the Lutherans. And maybe you think, though, if you're reading it, and you might well, that's true, but at least they shouldn't be sort of engaged in any frivolous kind of liking of things. Let's give them the basic material stuff to be moral. But surely they're not supposed to be indulging in banana splits and hot fudge sundaes and chocolate malted milkshakes and stuff. But in fact they are, only they don't have them. But what do they have that they seem to crave like hot fudge sundaes? No. Cherry jam. Remember that? It turns up twice on 321. Well, it starts from way back. We might as well get the first cherry jam, which is on 329. 229. 229, remember? When they're together, when Ivan is... What? 229. What am I doing? Just a second. Maybe 221 or 222. Yeah, 222. When the brothers are together, after the second paragraph, let me have soup and tea afterwards. I'm hungry, said Alyosha. Alyosha's always hungry. Takes a lot of energy to go around doing good deeds all the time like he does. He's often going down the street eating a roll, and here he is hungry again. And he goes, and Ivan says, and cherry jam, they have it here. You remember how you used to love cherry jam when you were little? You remember that? Let me have jam too. I still like it. And so that's the sort of hot fudge sundae part. But you get it again on 229, I believe. No, try. Did I read 222? I'm getting lost. No. So what's on 222? Okay, no, I see. No, it's what we want is Zosima. So that must be 321. There's just too many references here. Yeah, middle of 321. This is what people are complaining about with Zosima. He was not strict in fasting, allowed himself sweet things, ate cherry jam with his tea, ladies used to send it to him, and so forth. Well, if Zosima and Alyosha need food in order to do good deeds, and even need goodies like cherry jam, or don't need them, but want them and get them, it's clear that according to Dostoevsky, the Russian Orthodox Church is not into asceticism. Now, whether that's really true of the Russian Orthodox Church, I have no idea. But Dostoevsky thinks it's fine to be able to eat things you like, and it's only when it becomes something that keeps you from that begins to keep you from being free by making you addicted to something, like cherry jam, if you could imagine it, then it becomes a bad thing. So Zosima says on 303, this is the bad view now. You've got to find this interesting middle ground. Total asceticism, Dostoevsky thinks is wrong and thinks that the Orthodox Church thinks it's wrong. Total self-indulgence, where you eat as many good things as you can and try to learn appetites for new weird things you didn't even know you liked, and so forth. Sort of Berkeley approach is wrong too. The bottom of 303, the world has proclaimed the reign of freedom, especially of late. Nothing, and so forth and so forth. You have desires, and so satisfy them, for you have the same rights as the most rich and powerful. Don't be afraid of satisfying them and even multiplying your desires. That's the modern doctrine of the world. In that they see freedom. And Zosima thinks that is where they lose their freedom. He goes on and explains it on the next page. In answer to the modern view, he says at the end of the second paragraph, for how can a man shake off his habits? What can become of him if he is in such bondage to the habit of satisfying the innumerable desires he's created for himself? He is isolated in what concerns him, and what concern has he for the rest of humanity? Men have succeeded in accumulating great masses of objects, but the joy in the world is growing less. And so there is a place for a certain amount of not self-indulgence. And he goes on, this is the Russian Orthodox view, presumably. The monastic way is different. Obedience, fasting, and prayer are laughed at by the modern. Yet only through them lies the way to real true freedom. I cut off my superfluous, unnecessary desires. Interesting. I don't know what to say about cherry jam. He's obviously does seem to be a superfluous, unnecessary desire, that he's not inclined to cut it off. I guess he means just be moderate. I mean, don't cultivate as many superfluous desires as you can. Find all kinds of interesting things which you didn't even know that existed that you really like, want more of. But on the other hand, it's okay to enjoy a few things, and he does. He says, I subdue my proud and wanton will and chastise it with obedience, and with God's help I attain freedom of spirit, and with it spiritual joy. Which is most capable of conceiving a great idea and serving it? The rich man in his isolation, or the man who has freed himself from the tyranny of material things? Okay, so on the one hand, the Grand Inquisitor sort of lets people have the tyranny of material things and habits, and the Jesus figure says, no, don't eat anything but the absolute minimum to stay alive. And Zosima says, eat as much and enjoy as much as you need to have the energy to do moral things, and even eat something more that you enjoy, as long as it doesn't enslave you and keep you from enjoying things and being free to do what you want. As long as he thinks, my hunch is, as long as he could say no to cherry jam, if he wanted to, then it's okay. But if he's addicted to cherry jam, then he's lost his freedom, and that's not okay. So that's the story. So he's got the middle ground. I think I just read the necessary quotes. Yeah. And now, what does he think we should do as far as planned economy is concerned? Granted, now that we've got people not eating all they can, but not eating the absolute minimum either, but something in between. So I tell you, this is sort of boring and not very original, and I'm sorry about that, but it's sensible. But anyway, he's got an interesting proposal about how should you organize the state, the economy. How should you organize the economy? Well, he thinks that what you should do is not have one big state economy, but lots of local commune-like economies. This went over well in the 70s when people were going up to Oregon and Washington and setting up hippie communes in which they would all know each other and love each other and make the food and share the food and the clothes and stuff. The Amish were the kind of heroes of this, or the model of this. And I think Dostoevsky is proposing something like that. He thinks that it would be great to have local communities, and you wouldn't have to sort of forcibly redistribute the goods. Each would actually give according to his ability, to each according to his need. And you can see this on 281, where he's proposing it. No, not 281. I'm having a hard time keeping track of my plans today. 283. Yes, the bottom of 283. It goes back to the Lutherans and prowling around, and the poor priests who were too hungry to be able to fight them off. On the bottom of the next page, you get what should these priests do? Just eat less? He says that won't work. Just go out and spend all their time growing things to eat? Well, then they can't go and help the people, their parishioners, the people they're supposed to take care of. So here's what he says. You tell them simple tales, you penetrate their hearts. Give 1 hour a week to it in spite of your poverty, only 1 short hour. And you will see for yourself that our people are generous, gracious, and grateful, and will repay you 100-fold. Mindful of the kindness of their priest and the moving words they've heard from him, they will of their own accord freely help him in his fields and in his house, and will treat him with more respect than before, so that it will even increase his worldly well-being. So if you do good deeds to people, they will help you, and everybody will be happier, and everybody will have enough to eat, and so forth. If you get into these communes where you are actually personally involved with all the people who you depend on, who depend on you. That's his proposal. Now the next question is, just in time to finish this proposal. So, and what do you think? Is this a plausible view? What's happened to the Amish are still going on, which is impressive. I don't know of any hippie communes that are still going on. Do you? Huh? I don't. What? I see. Yes. Well, that's the nearest thing, but it isn't a full-time job. I see what you mean. And I was wondering, last time I was teaching this, a big sort of discussion broke out over whether in Israel the idea of the kibbutz is still an important part, or whether people have discovered you can't be selfless like that, and be property-less like that. Anybody know? Nobody knew. Yeah, you've got something to say about that. Go ahead. What? Still very popular. And they share everything, right? No personal possessions. Something like that. Okay. Well, it works to some extent then. It didn't seem to work here. Yeah.
A lot of people still have money
in the kibbutz. Yeah, that's what I have heard. I think that's why I was sort of emphasizing this totally selfless sharing of everything with everybody, which Dostoevsky's got as the Zosima proposal, doesn't seem to work. Now, and that turns out to be, and this is the last thing I want to say, very interesting and surprising. Suppose you say to Dostoevsky, well, it doesn't work. People are, if not selfish and lazy, at least they want some possessions of their own. They're not able to just share, giving everybody what they need, and so forth. Would Dostoevsky say, uh-oh, I guess I got it wrong. Human nature isn't as nice as I thought it was. Or what? Well, I think this is one of the places where Zosima's got it wrong. And where Dostoevsky knows that Zosima's got it wrong. These two protected. In the monks in the monastery do presumably live this way, without private possessions, I presume, and without money. But people normally can't live this way. And you see this on 293. Now, what I want to say is, this is something, a part of a bigger picture, which I can't give it all to you yet. But Dostoevsky is going to say, human beings are nasty and brutish. As Hobbes said, a famous philosopher, human life is nasty, brutish, and short. Dostoevsky totally believes that people are intrinsically selfish. And that's why the hippie communes wouldn't work. And that's why people have possessions. I don't know what they aim at. I bet they have possessions and money. But they have also a kind of lot of shared activities. I don't know. But anyway, here's what Dostoevsky thinks. The bottom of 293, about 10 lines from the bottom. Everyone strives to keep his individuality. Everyone wants to secure the greatest possible fullness of life for himself. But meantime, all his efforts result not in attaining fullness of life, but self-destruction. For instead of self-realization, he ends by arriving at complete solitude. All mankind in our age is split up into units. Man keeps apart, each in his own groove. Each one holds aloof, hides himself, and so forth. He ends up being repelled by others and repelling them. He heaps up riches for himself. This is Hobbes' picture exactly. And thinks, how strong I am now and how secure. And in his madness, those are sort of build-up gated communities in which you keep your money and your property and keep all the other people out. And in his madness, he does not understand that the more he heaps up, the more he sinks into self-destructive impotence. Well, that's interesting. How is he going to, I'm not going to try to answer this yet, but how Dostoevsky's got the view that people are sinful, selfish, and so forth, and want private property and lots of it. How is he going to defend a kind of view in which there ought to be communities in which people love and help each other? Well, he's got a view about that, a very interesting view about it. But we can't do that part yet. So we stop with that for the moment. And next time we do the interesting ones, the ones about church and the ones about miracles, because there he has really original ideas.